Hi Fleabags, it's Raven, and it's that time again where I showcase my love for Final Fantasy XIV by discussing each and every dungeon. This video is the third and final part in the mini-series where I've been ranking all 31 dungeons in the A Realm Reborn saga to find out which are the worst and which are the best. We're in the home stretch now and we will be discussing my personal top 10 favourites. In my view, every dungeon in this list represents the absolute pinnacle of what A Realm Reborn dungeons have to offer, and I can honestly see why any of these dungeons could be somebody's number one pick. The main elements that have been considered for each dungeon involves their respective atmosphere and mechanics, as well as how enjoyable they are. I will also make reference to any lingering thoughts that I have about them. Please note that at the time of recording, the dungeons have been reviewed during Dawntrail patch 7.4. Additionally, here is your one and only spoiler warning. There will be spoilers for Realm Reborn and its post-story arcs. There will be no Heavensward or spoilers for any other expansions in this video. And finally, one last thing before we continue. This list is very subjective and I welcome your thoughts in the comments below. If you think I've been overly critical of any of your favourite dungeons, let me know and state your case. Let's talk about it, because I can just tell already that this list is a controversial one. Okay, enough yapping from me. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel and relax as we explore the grand finale of this mini-series. Welcome to my top 10 list. Fading into the 10th spot, we discover the lost city of Amdapor. I absolutely loved this dungeon when I played through it for the first time. I fondly remember the first time I saw the opening cinematic pan of the zone and saw the gloomy, overcast atmosphere. It hit me like a wave of gloom and gave me goosebumps. The weather and lighting of this dungeon really complements the melancholy piano score. This whole environment looks so unique. It really looks like nothing else in the game's overworld even 10 years later. Just look at these weird floating mushroom things. If a zone had this look to it in the overworld, I'd be all for it. Now in the Final Fantasy XIV lore, the city of Amdapor was once a vibrant city that flourished in the 5th Astral Era due to white magic. However, this age of prosperity didn't last long, as the Makai unleashed a powerful void scent upon the city. The Amperdori managed to seal it away, however at the cost of their civilization, leaving the remaining void scent to remain in this depraved land. The enemy design is wickedly phenomenal in this dungeon. Hecatais, mould enemies, moths, gremlins, and more Diomites. Damn, they do get around a bit, these Diomites. There's also many loot chests that are mimics in disguise. The opening boss of this dungeon, Decaying Gourmand, looks incredible. In part 2, I reviewed the Gubu boss in the Wanderer's Palace and stated that there is a much better Gubu fight later on, and this is it. An undead Gubu with its stomach being a mouth? Heck yeah. The Decaying Gourmand is what is referred to as an Ashkin, a being that is a reanimated shell of a corpse and unable to return to the livestream, searching for peace that never comes. This boss has a variety of attacks that initially doesn't seem much different to the usual Gubu attack pattern. Large circular damage moves, poisonous spore attacks, But get this, the boss can even target party members and snack on them, requiring the other players to free them from the clutches of its belly. Good stuff. A very unique mechanic for this stage of the game. I honestly wish there was a mount available for this guy. After the boss, we press on and we fight more mould and insects, before we get to the next boss, an Ariok. The Makar use Arioks to carry and transport Voidsent behind enemy lines. As you can see, the Ariok is flying around the boss arena, and we need to get him down. This is done by attacking the other enemy floating around the arena, the Ranch Waymora. This will coat whoever is in front of it with flakes, and this causes the Ariok to then target the player with the most flakes attached to them. It is important to know, however, that the flakes are a debuff that increases your damage taken, so it is key to manage this. The boss can also perform an eerie sound wave that damages everyone, and so this is when the group's healer has their time to shine. The boss can also inflict poison and debuffs that reduce the healing received. And lastly, the Ariok can create pools of pollen that causes damage over time. Once the Ariok is defeated, we then enter the inner sanctum of the White Tower. Here we have a series of platforms containing Voidsent along with some pillars. The pillars improve the health regeneration for one of the elite enemies here, so it is best to target the pillars first. A cool mechanic to keep things interesting, I guess. We continue our descent and repeat the same action again, but with more pillars and enemies, before we have a showdown against the final boss of this dungeon and the reason behind this cursed city. Remember I mentioned a powerful Voidsent? Well, it turns out it's Diabolos himself. And man, this boss is tough. The boss has a lot of deadly attacks, but the most important one requires some preparation to avoid massive damage. When the fight begins, 8 diabolic doors appear around the arena, and ever so briefly the symbols above the doors can be seen. Essentially, you need to remember which doors have matching pairs of symbols, and try to keep track of them until such a time when Diabolos casts Ruinous Omen. Then open 2 doors that have matching symbols to avoid an attack that inflicts huge damage. If you get this wrong, however, you can recover via good healing. The boss can also deal room-wide damage and prevent players from moving temporarily. And Diabolos also has many area damage attacks. Most of his attacks can inflict Diabolical Curse, and this can stack up to 8 times. The more of these you have, the more damage you take from Diabolos. And once defeated, Diabolos falls, seemingly never to be seen again. Overall, the environment is nice, and Diabolos presents a nice challenge for first timers. It's a very cool dungeon. It's just the case that I prefer others on this list. Haunting the 9th spot, we have Hawk Manor. The best early game dungeon without a shadow of a doubt. I guess you could say the others didn't have a ghost of a chance against this one. This dungeon is just fun. It's actually a fairly short dungeon. It is just a manor house after all, but the way in which this dungeon is designed really does make good use of the limited amount of space that this dungeon has. We spawn in to an organ-style orchestra of spooky howlings, and we can see immediately ahead of us is a grand staircase that has a mystical barrier. What I do want to draw attention to is the reflection of the stained glass window of the manor lighting up the top portion of the stairs due to the moonlight outside. That's really, really cool. Now you may be wondering why this manor is haunted. Essentially, the manor's owner, Lady Amandine, was a vain individual obsessed with beauty, However, the calamity had left her disfigured and isolated. Ultimately, with the help of the Ascians, she entered a dark pact with a powerful Voidsent she herself named Helicarnassus, where she would sacrifice her own handmaidens and mana staff so Voidsent can inhabit their bodies, which is why this manor is haunted. The starting room is one of few spacious areas in this entire dungeon, and we begin by heading down the left corridor. The main gimmick of this dungeon is to explore the side rooms to defeat the enemies, which drop keys to progress. It's always good when side areas are incentivized to be explored, and this is no exception. We continue on past various spooky statues that thankfully don't come alive at any point in this dungeon, which makes a nice change. And we fight various enemies such as bats, succubi, and carpet stains? No matter, we press on and we make our way to the boss. Okay, there is something I want to get off my chest at this point, and this is coming from someone who does have a fondness for this dungeon. Do you remember everything I said previously about the earlier section incentivizing exploring side areas? Well, chuck that out the window in this portion, because all the side paths here are completely optional, and you can just beeline it straight to the boss. An odd lack of consistency in the dungeon design. We fight through the Mana Claviger, a succubus who just kind of attacks us and does the occasional area of effect attacks that we've come to know and love by this point in the video. She drops a green key, which we can use on a door that's by the entrance to the boss room. It's the only dungeon boss that comes to mind where you have to then backtrack slightly through the way you came in to progress, and it's always funny when party members and myself forget this when replaying the dungeon. But getting lost in a spooky manner is on theme, so it's not a knock against this dungeon. We use the green key on the ivy door because ivy is green. Here we can take the stairs, or we can opt to be uncivilized and jump down and totally not break our legs. And we arrive in the prison area beneath the manor, where we fight skeletons, more succubi, and corpse flies. It's a similar affair to the earlier portion of the dungeon, getting keys from the side rooms needed to progress. One of the locked jail cells contains a yellow key which we need to get to progress, and we make our way to the Carnation door to face the second boss. Are Carnations yellow? Okay, I actually researched this because it bothered me that much when making my note. They can be various colours, so they should have called it the Buttercup door instead. Anywho, we move on to a duo of bosses called the Mana Jester and the Mana Steward, machinations of what became of Lady Amandine's most loyal subjects. Both die rather quickly, and it's the unwritten rule of Final Fantasy XIV to target the Jester first, so we do that. And be sure to obtain the bloody parchment dropped on the floor before using the teleport back to the starting area, where we open the barrier, and wow, what do you know? We are at the final boss already. That's fast. The Mana Sentry retreats and awakens its master, Lady Amandine. Throughout each stage of the fight, she uses Void Call to summon the Mana Sentry, who then introduces players to a new mechanic where they must turn themselves away from it to avoid being petrified and unable to move for a time. Eventually, the boss falls and the dungeon is over. So, is Hawk Manor good? Yes. Does it have its flaws? I think so. But, is it fun? Yeah, it's fun. And it doesn't outstay its welcome. I like the gimmick of scouring for keys to progress, even if that is kind of neglected at one point in the dungeon. Enforcing its way into the number 8 slot is Castrum Meridianum, the first dungeon outing that involves facing off against the Garlean Empire. And man, what a cracking dungeon! I must admit, this dungeon is difficult to rank, as it does crop up regularly in the daily roulette. From the outset, I love the espionage soundtrack that accompanies this dungeon. It truly feels like a sabotage operation. I like the environment too. The bluish dark sky really makes the light of the crystals in the distance stand out that much more. I also like the presence of the blue force field in the distance, constantly looming over the battlefield. Do you remember what I said about this being an espionage mission? Well, we immediately trigger the alarm and face a small army of Garleans and their Magitech machines from pretty much this point onwards for the rest of the dungeon. In terms of the size, this dungeon is actually quite small, but the length of this dungeon comes from the sheer number of enemies. This does make this dungeon have a rather unique feel to it compared to most other dungeons. The first boss is named the Black Eft, and it's one of those Magitech walkers. It does all the things you'd expect it to do really. Shoot, do blast attacks, shoot laser beams. And after the boss, we jump through the disposal chute. Ooh, very Star Wars inspired. If only we had a Darth Vader clone in this game. We then run up a hill whilst fighting a small battalion of enemies whilst avoiding mortar fire. And we then fight a Magitech Vanguard that has various area of effect attacks as well as a missile attack where we need to keep our distance from it. It's a rather fast fight that's over very quickly, and we continue round and face off against more Magitech Colossi and other Vanguards before we reunite with a side character, Cid, who has acquired a Magitech Walker of his own. Our goal is to then distract the enemy whilst he charges up an attack that deactivates the force field surrounding the Empire base, known as the Praetorium. Although, I think I missed the part when it was explained why the force field generators are placed outside of the force field itself.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
And we are then confronted by Livia Sans Junius, the most loyal elite commander to one of A Realm Reborn's biggest villains, Gaius Van Belsar, and then a boss fight against her ensues. Now this fight absolutely slaps, and I can confidently give the award for being the single best boss fight in any A Realm Reborn dungeon to Livia. There's also some narrative beats that add to the emotion of this battle. Livia having killed off one of our allies earlier in the story. She's very verbal too throughout the fight, which I feel is a nice touch. I do love it when a boss has time to talk smack mid-battle. Tank busters, dash attacks, air strikes, proximity based attacks, all in succession. This is one boss who simply does not hold back. This boss fight truly does elevate this dungeon. So a round of applause everyone to Livia for being the best boss in this video series. Oh wait, now she's dead. At number 7, we have Hullbreaker Isle. The island that has been aptly named due to some mysterious force sinking all of the ships that arrive looking for legendary treasure. I love the oceanic music, combined with the tropical look of this island. It is truly a spectacle. We work our way up the beach and immediately I fall into a bear trap. Ouchies. Already this early on in the dungeon we have fought chicken harpies, mantises, bees and lemurs, and this is the kind of enemy variety that sets this dungeon off to a solid start. We work our way up the hill and across a rickety wooden bridge to face off against the first boss of this dungeon, a Sasquatch. The main mechanic for this boss is that you will get a message on screen that states that the Sasquatch is hungry. During this time, the boss pounds their chest, causing a room-wide unavoidable attack that grants vulnerability stacks rather quickly. To prevent this, a party member must shake one of the nearby banana trees to drop some good old bananas for the boss to snack on. Occasionally, smaller monkeys may also come to steal the banana, and so the banana should ideally be defended. Other than that, the boss is fairly standard, and soon after it's defeated and we can continue on. Next we go into the caves and open some treasure chests. Oh no! They're traps! Better defeat them for the stone tablets they've consumed. We insert the tablets to open a hidden passageway that runs parallel to a small river. I like this environment here. We fight through some more serpents and Ninky Nankers, and god I love that name. And then we open and destroy every treasure chest in sight to find more tablet chunks to escape the cave. But wait, what's this? Oh no! We encounter our second dungeon boss guarding the exit, Storm, a water tunnel worm. You may notice that around the room are various bubbles, and these can trap you and prevent you from moving for a brief time, so it's best to avoid them for now. Storm loves area of effect attacks, and it can dive underground and re-emerge throughout the fight. There's two types of dive attacks, and the one to watch out for is indicated by a blue area that engulfs the whole arena. Remember those bubbles I told you to avoid earlier? Well, now is the time to run into them and get trapped by them on purpose, because it protects you from the incoming whirlpool attack. Once Storm is no more, we exit the cave, and we jump down. And to be honest, we should really have broken our legs at this point. But we press on nonetheless. Down into another beach area featuring more crabs, crawlers, jellyfish and flying chickens. Eventually we get to the final boss of this dungeon, and hey, it's another kraken! I like how the weather changes to heavy rain for this, and I like the various platforms used for the boss. It's a much more superior kraken fight than the one on Sastasha Hard, that's for sure. This boss is unconventional, as rather than fight the kraken head on, we instead must attack each of its tentacles whilst avoiding various ink and mini cyclones that the boss is summoning. Now, to navigate across the platforms, we need to use the geysers, but in doing so, we also gain vulnerability stacks, so we have to manage our time accordingly. The boss tentacles can also grab you and toss you to other platforms, which I always find to be hilarious. Once all tentacles are down, the boss retreats back into the depths and the storm subsides. Dungeon complete. Overall, a fantastic dungeon with fun, unconventional mechanics and peak enemy variety. I really enjoyed this one. Towering over the 6th spot is Pharaoh Sirius. Wow, we are really getting into the juicy dungeons now. First off, I absolutely love this singing chorus during the opening cinematic. It gives me chills, man. It's very fitting too, considering the dungeon is based around a siren residing within. Ever since I began my journey in the areas surrounding Limsa Lominsa and discovered the Umbral Isle in the distance with the Pharaoh Sirius Tower looming in the distance ominously, I just knew we would one day go there and it would be epic. We begin in the waterways far beneath the tower itself, forging our path ahead, defeating various water creatures until we find a sealed gate. Suddenly, the surrounding corpses, half engulfed in the same amber crystal as the tower, spring to life. Yup, undead. We proceed upwards and see the crumpled ruins of a once majestic place, a former beacon of sanctuary to sailors, now a crypt of torment. We fight through another pack of undead and reach the first boss, Simon the Unsinkable. He shoots corruption from his pistol, and he also can drop massive areas filled with corruption. You need to avoid these as soon as possible, and don't even entertain the idea of lingering in them a moment longer. Corruption will kill you fast. The boss also summons zombie warhounds, which kinda look cool. I want to pet them. After Simon the Unsinkable has sunken into a pool of corruption, we press onwards. Crystals rain down from the ceiling above, signifying the tower's instability as if the ether here has a mind of its own. More undead and corrupted sprites stand in our way as we ascend up the spiralling staircase of the tower, crystals crashing down from above, corrupted families of slimes in hot pursuit of us. I don't know what exactly is causing the crystals to fall down, nor do I particularly care, because it's just an awesome sequence. Immediately in the next area we can look out and see how far we have climbed, and yet we still have such a ways to go. We enter the second boss room to fight a zoo that has made its nest in this room. This boss can be tricky, but the strategy here is to avoid any of the zoo's eggs from breaking. Should they break, the zoo enrages and can deal big damage, like really big damage. Once defeated, we continue to climb, turning vials of corrupted ether to stop the gas clouds as we continue on to face the tyrant boss. I didn't know corrupted ether was used in the production of the T-Virus, but here's the proof, ladies and gents. We defeated the tyrant, and the dungeon hasn't ended? There's one final boss awaiting at the peak of the tower, the siren that has claimed the lives of many sailors throughout these lands. The siren has an assortment of mechanics. She often summons undead sailors to the fray, and these are key to defeat as quickly as possible to avoid them grabbing or stunning you. Occasionally, the siren will also perform a charming song, and this inflicts players with a debuff. To prevent players from being charmed for a rather substantial amount of time, it is wise that the healer ensures all party members are healed back to full health to rid them of the risk of being charmed. The siren also has various rush attacks, but other than that, she's not too difficult, and when she's defeated, the dungeon ends. Overall, the theme, pacing and the absolute masterclass of an atmosphere make Pharaoh Sirius a definite standout amongst a Realm Reborn dungeon offerings. Throughout the game, there are many dungeons that involve an ever-increasing climb, and I feel Pharaoh Sirius is one of the better vertical dungeons for this style. At number 5, we have Snowcloak. Wow. Just wow. The arctic and hopeful music, along with the sound of echoing bats within this ice cave, really sets the scene here. Snowcloak is an absolutely gorgeous dungeon. It has a soft vibe to it, which is actually something not many dungeons have in Final Fantasy XIV. It's peaceful and calming, like frozen mist, and that is why I and many others love it. When I told my fellow Wonder Pirates that I'm ranking the dungeons from A Realm Reborn, many believed that Snowcloak would be among the top of the list, and they weren't wrong. The enemy design in this dungeon is varied too. Even the first room has us fighting everything from Goobus to wolves, spriggans and bears. Speaking of which, we fight a bear that then drops a key. Perhaps it was hungry. And we open the gate to continue on to the dungeon's first boss, Wandil, an ice golem that can apply stacks of ice with its attacks, and accumulating 4 stacks results in a deep freeze that can lock you in place for a short while. But the boss is simple enough to defeat before it gets to that stage. We press on into a snowy area where Goobus drop in from above in giant snowballs.
Hello there.
There's also windy sections of cold wind that applies damage over time. Then, after fighting some more enemies, we get to the dungeon's second boss, a Yeti. And for a second boss of a dungeon, this fight is actually pretty good. The Yeti summons small boulders of snow, and 1 or 2 of them expand into bigger boulders. and after a while all the boulders detonate, with the bigger ones resulting in bigger explosions. The boss also uses area attack similar to that of the Chimera, whereby you either have to stay at a distance or come in close to the boss to dodge. Additionally, on occasion, the boss can pound on the ground and send adventurers flying upwards, which is also a charming visual. A fun boss indeed, that has a few tricks up its sleeve. In fact, an argument could be made that this is the best second boss of any dungeon in A Realm Reborn, so congratulations Yeti, you adorable, abominable chunk of fluff. Next, we go into a glacial section where we hold out against various waves of enemies, from gators, spriggans, ice enemies, and even a cyclops that bursts out of a wall. He must have come from Copperbell Mines. We dispatch them and we move on to the final stretch of the dungeon, where we defeat cultists and dragonkin. We grab a key off one of them and unlock the door to the dungeon boss, Fenrir, another stellar boss. I love the aura this boss has and the presence it has. Design wise, it looks like a natural predator of this region, being blue like the ice, with hair matching the colour of snow. The arena looks nice too. The main attack to watch out for here is when 4 crystals will drop down from above. These initially need to be avoided, but when the boss charges up a howl attack, he will unleash a wave of ice that will freeze players in place if they do not take cover behind the crystals. A short while later, the crystals will then explode, and if close by, will also freeze the players in place. Eventually, some crystals will then have a reddish tinge to them and be cracked. These lack structural integrity and will not last before the boss unleashes its icy howl attack, so be sure to stay behind the blue crystals. Other than that, the boss has your standard attacks involving tank busters and area attacks. A rather engaging and a really good boss fight. Overall, Snowcloak is definitely up there amongst the great dungeons of A Realm Reborn. The music is nice and atmospheric, even if it does begin to grate on me after a while. The second and third boss are really good, and the enemy variety and overall design of the dungeon solidifies its place amongst the best. A top tier dungeon for this list. At number 4, we have the Keeper of the Lake. Off the coast of Mordona, the ancient dragon Midgard Sommer stirs from its slumber. We arrive on the makeshift island wreckage, and I particularly like how the natural environment clashes with the man-made debris. It's a clash that really fits the lore theme of Midgard Sommer's stand against the Empire 15 years prior to the player's arrival. The ancient Dragon King, Midgard Sommer, and his Dragonkin fought the Garleans in the skies above Mordona. Midgard Sommer seemingly being mortally injured and ending the battle in a stalemate after crashing down with a Garlean flagship known as the Agrius. Their remains entwined as a monument to their clash. The music in this dungeon is also very majestic, with the notes building to a powerful crescendo. This music really captures the essence of starting from the bottom and climbing all the way to the top, in a similar vein to Pharaoh Sirius. We fight through some sea creatures and gain entry into the complex. And it is here we can see various creatures have made themselves home within the former Garlean facility. I like that we run on tubes to get to the first boss, which is a winged beast called Einhander. This boss is holding a minigun with its feet, and often summons other avian beasts to drop off missile canisters that when attacked by the boss will explode after a while, and this can cause massive damage for players nearby. A cool boss, again, very on theme with the clash between nature and man-made objects. We continue through the pipes deeper into the facility and learn that the Garlean Empire still occupies part of this facility, and after running through a vanguard and some soldiers, we pick up an identification key to deactivate the barrier. In this next room, we are attacked by more soldiers as the Colossus is striking us from behind a barrier. Once the soldiers are defeated, we can unlock the barrier and deal with the Colossus. We do the same in the next area, and we proceed onwards to the next boss, the Magitech gunship. And I've only just realised the symmetry this boss has with the earlier dungeon boss. Einhander is a bird who acts more like a machine, whereas the Magitech gunship is a machine that looks like a bird and fights more like one. This boss does spread fire area damage and summons other guardians to help, but the boss itself isn't too bad. Next we arrive at the Keeper's Spine for the final leg of the dungeon, and this is my favourite part of the dungeon. By this point we are very high up. Another gunship is firing down at us as we are fighting dragons whilst we continue our climb. The blast from the gunship clears the way to the boss. I don't know what exactly happens to the gunship after this, so I'm just going to assume that it flies off. Either way, we then have a cutscene where Midgard Sommer is cranky because we disturbed his slumber, and summons a spirit version of himself to fight us as his music theme kicks in that conveys a feeling of sorrow. I love the simplistic arena design and the design of the boss. Midgard Sommer does a lot of area attacks. Occasionally, he summons spirit dragons that also fire beams of magic in the directions that they are facing, and this is usually in conjunction with Midgard Sommer's own area of effect attacks for the final stretch of the fight, whereby he is mustering all of his ether and whilst doing so summons mirage dragons that need to be defeated quickly. The cycle then repeats, and he is defeated and thus ending the dungeon. A really good dungeon overall, featuring a cool character in the lore. And this dungeon is really the mini arc that sets up the overarching Heavensward narrative to come later. Now, how does it stack up against the other great climbing dungeon on this list? Well, compared to Pharaoh Sirius, I think the climb to the top of that dungeon was better than this one. However, I do think the bosses in Keeper of the Lake were more enjoyable. I also feel that the Keeper of the Lake's overarching reach on the wider lore and narrative of the game also places this above Pharaoh's. But we really are splitting hairs by this point, as both dungeons really do play to their strengths. There's a lot of cool themes with Keeper of the Lake, and the design philosophy complements this. I jump for joy whenever it appears in my daily roulette, and that is why I have placed Keeper of the Lake at number 4. In third place, the Bronze Award goes to the Praetorium. From ascending a tower to working our way down one, it's time for the final dungeon in A Realm Reborn's base game, the Praetorium. The dungeon that so many dread to get in their main story roulette due to the sheer amount of unskippable cutscenes. I will say that this dungeon was very hard to place on account that I've run it an unhealthy amount of times. Narratively, the Praetorium takes place very soon after Castrum Meridianum. We took down Gaius Van Belsar's most loyal commander, as well as the protective force fields surrounding the base, and now we launch a full frontal assault on the Empire stronghold. The Praetorium is very much continuing the chain of sequences to cap off A Realm Reborn's arc against the Empire. And this dungeon is nothing like what comes before it chronologically throughout the game. The bombastic and yet heroic score really complements the height of our character's heroism at this particular point in time. There are so many moments I like about this dungeon. Cid, starting off with saying, "This is it, my friend," really does give the feeling of finality to this frankly perilous task to find and destroy the Ultimo weapon housed within. We warm up on some soldier enemies before making our way deeper into the complex. We now see explosions going off, destroying part of the wall surrounding us as we fight another group of enemies, before us having to divert and run along the outside rim of the structure, whilst fighting Magitech Deathclaws and Magitech Reapers, all whilst avoiding incoming mortar fire from the Garlean airships above. We make our way back inside the structure through a damaged wall and use the transponder to teleport us into the command chamber, where we find Gaius himself. We have an interaction between the Darth Vader knockoff himself and Sid, his adopted son. Gaius explains why he had Sid's father killed and offers an opportunity for Sid to join him as head of research and development so they can rule the galaxy as father and son. Sid declines and Gaius retreats, but not before sending a rather needlessly muscular Colossus to deal with us. A rather bland boss here, not gonna argue against it. He just does a series of area attacks that require dodging, and he falls quickly enough. His sword is cool though. We take the same elevator as Gaius did in a bid to catch up with him, and we commandeer a Magitech Walker in the process. Hell yeah! This is easily my favourite part of a dungeon, using the Empire's own technology against them. We pilot our trusty steed, a hacked and friendly walker we obtained earlier in the story, along the outer ridges of the base once again, whilst using its machine guns and cannons to clear away hordes of enemy soldiers and vehicles, all whilst avoiding yet more bombs being sent our way from the Empire fleet above. The lengths they go to try and stop us is truly commendable. We enter a lab area where we encounter yet more enemies, and prototype Ultima weapon arm units bursting from their containers. I wonder why they were building so many. We get to the blast door, but it is too thick to break through. Sid radios us and lets us know the only way to break through it is to sacrifice our friendly Magitech Walker, and so we oblige. It bursts down the door, but not before it powers down, and we share a brief moment of sadness at this inanimate object. We press on to find Nero Tolskava, the last of Gaius's commanders. Nero is a rather interesting character to say the least. He and Sid were once very close, but no longer. They share some bickering over the comms channel, and Nero explains that ever since Sid left the Empire, he struggled to shift the perception he was second rate compared to him. He also expresses jealousy how Gaius offered Sid a place at his side. He summons a giant hammer and it's showtime. This boss fight is rather fun too. A lightning barrier surrounds the arena, and Nero has attacks that require players stacking together, as well as tank busters and usual attacks we come to expect. Occasionally a Magitech Deathclaw joins the fray, and this will target a player and push them into the electric barrier if left unchecked. Nero also has knockback attacks and conal area attacks, and there's one in particular where he darts to a side of the arena and charges up a conal attack, leaving himself open for a beatdown. Once defeated, the lights go out and he flees, but not before taunting us that the Ultima weapon has again been reactivated. Sid informs us of a power surge in the deepest chamber of the facility, and will use an elevator nearby to descend towards it. Until...
Tell me, for whom do you fight?
Gaius himself lands on the elevator and carries out a rather interesting villainous monologue, basically questioning the very Eorzean way of life, and questioning why our gods don't come to help us, and how they're no different to primals. A very interesting notion. He then says it's up to man to take charge of its own destiny, and only the strong will dictate to the weak. He pulls out his gunblade and powers up to the point he transforms golden. I don't know whether it's ever explained why he turns gold here, but it's cool and very anime, so I'll let it slide. We engage Final Fantasy XIV's initial primary antagonist on the elevator, where he uses his gunblade to cast various spectral slash attacks, as well as call in airstrikes and clones of himself to attack the player whilst he charges up a devastating attack. It's a decent boss battle, After the boss fight, the dungeon is complete and Gaius retreats to prepare to unleash the Ultima weapon. Overall, I really like the Praetorium. It's cool that we fight Gaius one-on-one before we take on the Ultima weapon. A very compelling villain and a very good way to cap off the dungeon. The dungeon as a whole is just action-packed, and I love it for that reason. So well done Praetorium for winning the Bronze Award. And then there were two. In second place, the Silver Award goes to the Wanderer's Palace Hard Mode. Okay, real talk here. If you had told me before I began my rankings that I would end up placing this at number 2, I would have been shocked. Oh no! The Mamuldja have taken over the Wanderer's Palace? Those poor Tomberries! The music is very heroic at the start of this dungeon. It really does convey the sense of danger these Tomberries are in, even if they at one point tried to kill us themselves. I like the green sky as well. It really helps make this version of Wanderer's Palace feel more distinct than its earlier counterpart, even if we are essentially retreating the same route of the dungeon for the most part. Now, as Dawntrail's one and only fan, I like Mamuldja. So I think they're a good antagonistic force in this dungeon. We save the 3 Tomberries and open a wooden gate to the first boss, Frumious Kohil-Jar, a blue Mamuldja riding a dinosaur. This gives me so much Warhammer Lizardmen vibes, and I'm all for it. It's a really cool design. The boss fight here is fairly simple. Every now and then the boss casts Blazing Agnon, where it spawns a fire spear in the ground that, if left unchecked, causes fire damage and burn stacks. Once defeated, we enter the next area of the dungeon, where we are then introduced to a new mechanic involving Sacred Standards. Now these standards buff nearby enemies, making them more defensive and deal more damage. So ideally need to be toppled first before engaging the enemies. We head on upwards and do the same again, this time against some dinosaur enemies. Man, I friggin' love dinosaurs. We continue making our way through the dungeon, toppling standards and enemies as we go, before we arrive at the next boss, Sliffy Zaluja, a Mamuldja mage. He's what I could best describe as a shaman, in that he drops various coloured totems around the arena that can inflict both buffs and debuffs. These range from granting more damage for yourself, or inflicting you with heavy, or making you more susceptible to fire damage. After the boss, we see a room of dead Tomberries. How sad. We continue on into a poison area and obtain the key to unlock a door to save some captive Tomberries. We truly are the Warrior of Light. They show us a hidden path, which is nice. We kill a slime and drain the pipes. We then turn a valve to open a secret door to the main dungeon boss, a giant blessed one named Manxom Malajaja. This boss fight is really cool. He does conal slashes and even drops Sacred Standards. The boss can drop clouds of black smoke, and these apply the Rotted Lungs debuff. And also even Doom, which is an instant kill mechanic. Plus, after the boss is defeated, we are treated to a rather amusing cutscene, with the Tomberries getting their vengeance. Overall, a fantastic dungeon. Prior to this list, I struggled to remember this dungeon even existed, but I had an absolute blast playing it. I loved how the Mamuldja muscled their way into the Tomberry territory and set up their bony barricades and totems, and made themselves comfortable within the Wanderer's Palace. A really good dungeon that told a really compelling mini-story. And that is why I have placed the Wanderer's Palace hard at number 2 on this list. And finally, here we are at the number 1 spot. We have the Tamtara Deepcroft hard. There's more hauntings going on in the Deepcroft. They should really just nuke this entire place by this point. From the outset, I'm a huge fan of the now red lighting within the Deepcroft. It really does escalate the creepiness factor. This is easily the most unsettling dungeon within A Realm Reborn. Additionally, this dungeon has cool lore attached to it, as it ties in with not only a branching side story from the main story quest, but also alongside the Palace of the Dead storyline content, which is neat. The story here revolves around another group of adventurers who are ever so slightly dysfunctional and inept. Up until the point that this dungeon takes place, we know that they try to follow in our characters' footsteps. This is confirmed by a piece of parchment early on in the dungeon, written by a female member of the group called Edda. Edda was the mage of this group, and her partner Avir was also part of the group. One of the group's adventures went awry and he was killed. Also, up until this point, the archer of the group, Leavin, we know has also died, as she was killed during the Garlean Empire's attack on the Waking Sands. The only other remaining party member is the Lalafell Pyre, who had abandoned the group before their eventual fate. He does later show regrets for this, and showed us a wedding invitation Edda has received from her late partner Avir, and she has gone to be reunited with him, as she is naive and obsessed with him. So that's how we end up back in the Deepcroft. It's nice that this dungeon has a lot of story behind it. We continue on fighting more and more Deramites because they've infested this rankings video for far too long. This opening act of the dungeon is very similar to the first Deepcroft outing, killing the Voidsent, deactivating the orbs. We find more and more parchment letters that reveal more personal insight from Edda. Without turning this into a lore video, the long and short of it is she descends into madness during her time here.
A few moments later,
we arrive at the first boss, the reanimated Leavin. She summons a group of undead bestmans, and she also targets a player with a large area of effect attack where she unleashes a volley of arrows, and the player must try to hit as many of the bestmans with this attack. But to be honest, she doesn't have much health, so one could just ignore the mechanics entirely and burst her down. The next stage of the dungeon involves exploring the side tunnels and opening various coffins, and killing more Voidsent within. I also love the creepy scribbles on the walls within the side rooms. We find another note here from Edda, where she's writing to her dead husband-to-be. She mentions finding a body to make him whole again. We defeat more Voidsent and unlock the seal to find Pyo. He is bound in the centre of the arena and cannot move, while a Dullahan called Spare Body appears. Our goal is to not only defeat this, but also protect Pyo. After the Dullahan falls, Pyo flees for safety and we teleport to the inner sanctum. Behind us is a note from Edda to her husband-to-be, where she admits to sending out wedding invitations to bring guests to the Deepcroft so that she can use their souls to create a body for him. Ah, young love. We fight our way to the boss arena where we find Edda, who summons the head of her beloved Avir. She then turns to us and says she wants our body and soul, while she giggles away. The boss itself, Avir, shoots lasers from his eyes, whilst Voidsent appear from the portals, and they shoot line attacks at us. Eventually, grooms-to-be crawl out of the portals and crawl towards Edda, who is enacting some kind of ritual. To prevent this ritual from taking place, and us taking massive damage, we must defeat these crawling grooms-to-be before they get to her. Once Avir is defeated, a shocked Edda retreats, and plummets to her demise. This dungeon is absolutely brilliant. It tells a nice story that ties into the world, and it shows us how being a hero can have dire consequences. The atmosphere is phenomenal, and the environmental storytelling is top notch. I can't praise this dungeon enough, and I feel it is worthy of being crowned at the top spot as the best dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. And so, this 3-part series of ranking all 31 dungeons in A Realm Reborn has come to a close. Thank you for joining me. Your viewership and support truly means the world to me. Do you agree with this list? Hit me up in the comment section below, and be sure to drop a like to let me know if you want to see more Final Fantasy XIV related content in future. The players featured in the background footage are all from my fellow Wonder Pirates guild. We are based on the Raiden server, and if you actively play Final Fantasy XIV, then you are most welcome to come and check us out, and who knows, you may feature in future content. This has been your host, Raven the Makoto, and I look forward to seeing you next time, where the dungeons within future expansions will be ranked from worst to best. Take care everyone.